Moving on. Our main story tonight concerns voting. It is the subject of countless election PSAs, which are always basically the same. Celebrities essentially begging you to vote. But in 1988, there was a strikingly different one. All I'm going to say about this is there is a surprise at the end and also at the beginning.
200 years ago, the Constitution of the United States suggested a very simple way to keep fools like these out of our government. A reminder from members only.
Holy shit! What are you doing, members only? That is a bold move, putting your name so close to Hitler. Although, you know what? I will say, it does actually fit pretty well, considering that members only would have been a perfect slogan for the Nazis. But I want to talk to you about voting because, as you undoubtedly know, the latest attack on voting rights in America is well underway.
A new report from the Brennan Center shows that between January and July, these 18 states passed 30 laws that restrict voter access. They include crackdowns on mail-in and early voting, harsher voter ID requirements, and voter roll purges.
Yeah, it's true. All those states passed laws that make it harder for people to vote. And if anyone is surprised to see New Hampshire up there, let me just remind you, it's a state that's 88% white with a Republican governor and no adult seatbelt law. Sure, they present themselves as charming, but deep down, they are basically just Florida with foliage. That is it. And some of the biggest efforts to undermine voting rights have been concentrated in the closest states in last year's election, especially these three, where Biden's combined margin of victory was less than 43,000 votes. If they had gone the other way, Trump would still be president right now, meaning COVID would be even worse, we'd be at war with, I don't know, let's say Luxembourg, and we'd all be living under Attorney General My Pillow guy. I know things are bleak right now, but depressingly, it's also important to remember this is technically the better timeline. And I know that those pushing these bills claim that critics of them are completely distorting what is inside them and that any objections could simply be cleared up with a basic step.
I would encourage people to actually read the bill, find out what the facts are.
It's time to take a chill pill, folks. It's time to read the bill.
Read the bill. There is no voter suppression. Read the bill and show me one person who's eligible to vote that will not be able to vote. You can't find it. It's a lie. It's just not there.
All right, well, if that is your criteria, then you obviously win. Of course, no one is going to find a bill that literally says this specific person should not be allowed to vote. Even though we all know there is someone who shouldn't be allowed to vote, and it's this guy. His name is Brandon Caruso. His favourite pizza topping is no sauce. His favourite season of The Wire is I haven't watched it yet. And his list of celebrities he'd have sex with outside of marriage is exclusively 5 times the Wheel from Wheel of Fortune. Not Vanna, not Pat, the Wheel. 5 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, Brandon. But the thing is, if you do actually read these bills, you quickly find they absolutely make it harder to vote, and particularly for certain people. So tonight, we thought we would take a look at the attack on voting rights and how best to fight it. And let's start with what is in these bills, because it's a lot. For instance, in Texas, where, remember, that guy claimed you can't find a single instance of voter suppression, one thing their bill does is roll back a lot of the innovative measures put in place during the pandemic that made voting more accessible. Among other things, it gets rid of 24-hour and drive-through voting, both methods that Harris County implemented last year. And as the county clerk who oversaw that election points out, when you look at the precincts where those methods were most popular, it's clear that the harm is pretty targeted.
Why are we taking 24-hour voting away? Because 56% of voters in November who used 24-hour voting were people of color, and they know that. Why are we taking drive-through voting away? Because 53% of those voters in 2020 were people of color.
Yeah, it's pretty obvious who is being targeted there. They may as well say, you can't arrive at a polling place exhibiting a face in the Fenty 300s or higher. Sure, you're not saying people of colour, but we all know what the fuck is happening. And it's not just drive-through voting. Texas and all these other states have added new barriers to voting by mail, coincidentally, just a year after elections in which the percentage of black people who voted by mail surged past white voters. Meanwhile, all these states have put harsher voter ID requirements in place, even though federal court cases found black and Latino voters in states with harsh laws disproportionately lacked access to the types of voter IDs required to vote. So already, when you do read these bills, you quickly find some shit in plain view. It's like a second grader playing hide and seek. You're bigger than the coffee table, bud. I can see your feet, hands, full face, and you're giggling very loudly. You didn't do a good job at hiding. And some of those pushing these bills, like this state representative from Georgia, even argue that if a law does make it harder to vote, that's not necessarily a bad thing.
I do believe that voting in this country is a privilege. And
it's a right.
And it's a right as well, but it ought to mean enough where you can put forth a little bit of effort in trying to cast your ballot.
Okay, except something can't be a right and a privilege that you need to work for, because those are two completely different things. For instance, it is a right for Brandon Caruso to imagine what hot, tawdry sex with the Wheel of Fortune would be like, to imagine climbing on top of it and taking her all in, to think about the crowd watching him. Yeah, that's right, the studio audience is there, and they're rooting for him because he did it. Brandon finally did it. He's finally fucking the wheel. Imagining how good that'd feel is Brandon's right, but actually getting to grab those pegs and give the wheel a spin, that is a privilege that should take years of effort. And look, none of this is anything new. Republicans have been pushing restrictive voting laws for years. Back in 2013, North Carolina crafted a law that made it so the only acceptable forms of voter ID were the ones disproportionately used by white people in a bill a federal appeals court later said targeted African-American voters with almost surgical precision, which has to be the second worst context in which to hear that phrase, topped only by surgery. Look, ma'am, your husband's surgery was... We got in there with almost surgical precision. My team's not 100% yet, but we were really close on this one. And frequently, these laws have been helped along by well-funded groups like the Heritage Foundation, whose co-founder, Paul Weyrich, famously admitted, "I don't want everybody to vote," and whose former president, Jim DeMint, once approvingly said, in the states where they do have voter ID laws, you've actually seen elections begin to change towards more conservative candidates, pretty much giving the whole game away there. And Heritage is very much still at it. Just this year, the executive director of their sister organisation, Heritage Action, actually bragged about their role in pushing this year's new bills.
We're working with these state legislators to make sure they have all of the information they need to draft the bills. In some cases, we actually draft them for them. Iowa's huge victory. Governor Reynolds signed the bill on March 8th. Little fanfare. Honestly, nobody even noticed. My team looked at each other and were like, it can't be that easy. It can't be that easy.
Well, hold on there, TJ Maxx, Ivanka Trump, because anyone saying it can't be that easy to do anything other than sneaking their own snacks into the movies absolutely must be stopped. The point here is, this has been a concerted, organised effort over many years, but the reason it now has a much higher chance of working has to do with a pair of Supreme Court decisions that gutted the landmark 1965 Voting Rights Act, which prohibited racial discrimination in voting. The first decision, Shelby County versus Holder, basically released these areas, which had a prior history of discriminatory voting laws, from having to run any new ones past the federal government first before they took effect. And the second one, Brenovich versus DNC, essentially found that even if a voting restriction has a discriminatory impact, that in itself doesn't necessarily violate the Voting Rights Act. Those two decisions basically made it easier for some states to pass discriminatory laws, while at the same time making it much harder for anyone to challenge them. And given that one of the dwindling ways that you can still successfully sue under the VRA is by demonstrating a bill is racially motivated, it is hardly surprising that those passing these new laws have been quick to shut down any discussion of their racial impact. In fact, in Texas, in the midst of debating their new bill, there was this incredible moment.
Members, this is a reminder to everyone to be civil and respectful of our colleagues as we debate SB 1. The chair would appreciate members not using the word racism this afternoon.
Look. If the word you don't want people to use is racism, I hate to break it to you, but you're doing a racism. Someone might have told you that sooner, but in fairness, you told them they're not allowed. A constant theme in debates over these bills is black elected officials pointing out their impact and their white colleagues telling them to be quiet. In Arizona, back in April, they were debating a bill that makes it hard for many voters to receive an early ballot in the mail. But watch what happened when one lawmaker started pointing out the disproportionate impacts that would have. OK, but you still need a reason to legislate against something. You can't just do it based on a feeling. If that were the case, I would propose a bill to outlaw Tilda Swinton. Why? Too creepy. She looks like a ghost who knows exactly how and when you will die, but won't tell you because it's more fun for her that way. But look, I will say, despite the fact state and local officials found the last election to be the most secure in American history, the truth is, Many Republicans don't trust the system. But the reason for that might be that people like Dan Patrick spent all of last year calling voting by mail a scam by Democrats to steal the election and saying shit like this.
Look, when you have an opportunity to steal a vote, the Democrats will take advantage of it. You can swing the balance easily, Ed. I could give you 10 scenarios, but I won't because I don't want to give anyone ideas how you could easily steal thousands of votes.
Oh, come on, Dan. I can give you 10 scenarios, but I won't is just such an obvious lie. It's right up there with, I have a girlfriend, she goes to a different school, you wouldn't know her, or I'm 5 minutes away, or I've never sexually fantasized about lobsters. Come on, we've all done that. It's natural. They're stoic and terrifying. The perfect sexual combination. What are we looking for if not someone who knows what they want, but also hates you? That's lobsters, buddy. We want their claws pinching our earlobes. Not too hard, but honestly, hard. You know, like when the dentist says, does this hurt? And you say, no, but you mean yes, because you're kind of curious what this dentist can do when pushed. Do you know how many legs a lobster has? I'll tell you, a sex amount. Bonk, 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 bonk. That many. Fuck me stupid, you weaponized ocean bitch. Here is 4 hit reasons why it'd be cool to fuck an adult-sized lobster on holiday. They live a long time, meaning that they know what they're doing. Their backs are incredibly strong and responsive. I shouldn't have to explain to you why that's good sexually. They're incapable of racism, and they can't talk and ruin the mood. We ask, is this good? And they just sort of wobble their horrible black eyes around. My point here is, we all think about having sex with burdened, unhappy lobsters all the time, even in winter, and that is why we should not listen to Dan Patrick or, honestly, whoever it was I was talking about earlier, I don't remember. But here is the real thing. There is a reason that Patrick can give you 10 scenarios for Democrats stealing elections, but no evidence, and that is because, despite saying he would pay up to $1 million for evidence of voter fraud, he has, to put it mildly, not paid out. And local election supervisors themselves will tell you that these bills make no sense. The Florida supervisors of elections strongly opposed their state's new bill, with one Republican supervisor telling a reporter, it's stupid, okay? It was a solution looking for a problem. But it's actually one step worse than that. Because these are solutions to problems that have been deliberately and strategically manufactured. And the game is pretty obvious here. Use bullshit claims to stir up baseless fear, to pass unnecessary restrictions targeting particular groups. Just look what happened this week. The nonsense audit in Arizona came to a humiliating conclusion that failed to show yet again that Trump was cheated of victory, but its organisers still recommended the legislature tighten up the election process to provide additional certainty going forward. Because of course they fucking did. It's all a shameless attempt to get to the same place. So what can we do to fight all of this? Well, the good news is there is proposed legislation that addresses many of the problems that you've seen tonight. The John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act would restore parts of the VRA the Supreme Court gutted, and more substantially, there is the Freedom to Vote Act, which would, among other things, make voting by mail available for every voter, make Election Day a public holiday, and make automatic voter registration a national standard. It is great. Unfortunately, Mitch McConnell has announced that he will filibuster any attempt to get either of those acts passed. So, if we want to protect the ballot, which we absolutely should, we need to end the filibuster. And you would hope that every national Democratic politician would be absolutely screaming about this, but some are doing the exact opposite. Joe Manchin has consistently defended the filibuster. And when Joe Biden was asked if he supports doing away with it to specifically protect voting rights, this was his maddening answer.
What I don't want to do is get wrapped up right now in the argument whether or not this is all about the filibuster or, look, the American public, you can't stop them from voting. You tried last time. More people voted last time than any time in American history in the middle of the worst pandemic in American history. More people did. And they showed up. They're going to show up again. They're going to do it again.
Sure, Joe. Maybe. Or maybe they'll show up and get turned away because of everything that we've been talking about here. Biden's White House even reportedly told voting rights groups that it is possible to out-organise voter suppression. But the problem is, it isn't. It just isn't. That is what voter suppression is. As activists and actual organisers will tell you. Yeah, he's right. The solution to voter suppression cannot be to just vote, for the same reason that the solution to being locked out of your home can't be to tell someone, just go inside and get the keys. What the fuck are you talking about? I'm locked out. How are you not understanding this situation? All of this is to say to Joes Biden, Manchin, and any other Joe who wants to skip doing anything significant and instead rely on the perseverance of the American spirit, stop fucking around and fix this. I know it is tempting to bang the optimistic drum that more Americans showed up last year than ever before, and by gum, they'll do it again. But here is the thing. The Republicans know that that might happen. That is why they're doing this. And anyone unwilling to do what it takes to actually tackle this problem should, and I cannot believe I'm going to borrow this quote, really be sat down and not allowed to speak. And now, this.
And now, the utterly spectacular dramatic pauses of ESPN's Stephen A. Smith.
I'm going to tell you the winners and losers for this summer already. Houston, you have a problem. Speaking of problems, I'm pretty ticked off. Oh, am I ticked? To put it mildly, I am having a very bad day. I am in no mood. So what happens? Not one, not one, not one. Not bad. Not bad. I'll tell you something. Melo's gone.
Moving on. Before we go tonight, a quick word about the outdoors. It's home to lakes, trees, and the candy witch who lures children to their doom. It's great. Specifically, though, I want to talk about one way to conserve the precious nature that the outdoors contains, and that is duck stamps. If you've never heard of them, I'll let this charmingly stilted 1990s video explain it to you.
The majority of stamps are sold to waterfowl hunters who, by law, must have a federal duck stamp in their possession while hunting. Increasingly, others, young and old, are voluntarily buying federal duck stamps as an effective, direct way to help conserve our nation's waterfowl and other wildlife.
Now, I know that looks sweet, but to be fair, what you didn't see there is the screaming that happened as soon as those two kids got home. What are these? Duck stamps? I sent you to the store for medicine. Listen to me. Your sister is about to die because you keep spending all of her insulin money on bird stickers. But it is true. Every year, the federal government issues a duck stamp, which isn't a postage stamp, but it's effectively a kind of permit for hunters. They currently cost $25, and they've actually been a huge success story for conservation, with 98 cents of every dollar that they make going to protecting wetlands. Since 1934, the stamps have raised more than $1 billion to protect over 6 million acres of wetlands habitat. And that is partly because non-hunters like to collect these duck stamps too, and you can see why. There have been some beauties in the past, like this 1960s stamp featuring a family of red-head ducks, this 1980s one showcasing majestic snow goose, and this mottled duck from the 2000s who is absolutely ripped. Check out the definition on that back. Quick question, does this stamp come with mooshu pancakes? Because that duck is shredded. But the best thing about the duck stamp is how each year's is chosen, because it's an annual nationwide art competition, and the judging of it is no joke.
The judges independently vote on each entry. They consider not only the visual impact of the art and how it might look as a stamp, but also whether it is anatomically accurate.
Yeah, it's true. Ducks must not only be beautiful, but also anatomically accurate. An especially fun requirement, given that you're painting an animal that has, as we've mentioned on this show before, a long corkscrew-shaped penis. It is a fact that drove us to create this image of Donald Duck that, as of taping, Disney has not yet sued us over. And once you start looking into the duck stamp contest, it is not long before you find some drama. There are big names like the Hotman brothers, an actual duck dynasty, who going into this year's competition had collectively won it 13 times. They truly are the duck goats. And there's also been a heated rivalry between one of the regular traditional duck artists, Tim Taylor, and his more avant-garde rival, Rob McBroom, who Tim Taylor has no time for.
Rob McBroom is a guy who enters the duck stamp every year, and every year he violates the rules. He breaks every rule of the contest. And he's really just an attention seeker. He's found this contest that people take very seriously, and the contestants work really hard on their entries, and he mocks it. He does paintings that mock it.
Yeah, Yeah, I mean, to be fair, he does kind of do that. He submitted paintings to federal and state contests that clearly go against the desired aesthetic, like this one of two cartoonish ducks, and whatever the fuck this is. Also, Rob McBroom is very much aware of Tim Taylor's criticism and trolled him for years, even taking previous Taylor paintings and parodying them.
This is about as close as you can get to Tim's original without actually knowing the size. And it's completely built from scratch.
This is the piece of work that Rob McBroom took off of the internet to abstract.
The little bits I've learned about him, I'm like, okay, he obviously hates Barack Obama and he hates communism. So I decided to load it up with imagery with that.
Here's Barack Obama's birth certificate that he released. Here's the eye of the duck, which is the communist symbol.
There's other things in here, like he was holding a baby at a christening, and then I put Lenin's head on top of it.
Wow, that is petty. Honestly, if I were Tim, I might back off at this point, because if this man made a communist duck out of your personal photographs, just think what else he's capable of. Here's another one, Tim. The feathers are made out of bank statements I fished out of your trash, and the beak is from a photo of you I took while you were sleeping. But by all means, keep talking shit. The point here is, the duck stamp competition is intense. Last year, there were some incredible entries, like this one of a duck somehow tripping in midair, and this one, which I would argue is actually a dog stamp. A dog on his way to a leather bar while a duck happened to be passing. I'm not saying that as a criticism, I'm just saying that is what it is. But the overall winner was this objectively wonderful, very anatomically accurate painting of a lesser scalp drake by artist Richard Clifton. And hiding the duck's coily dick underwater was a very smart move there, Richie. You can't see it, but you know it's down there, swirling away. Quick, fun side note. That duck call in the corner is only there because under the Trump administration, there was suddenly a rule that all entries had to feature hunting imagery, which many people, understandably, did not really like. Thankfully, that rule will be gone next year, which is good because potentially driving people away from the duck stamp is a really terrible idea. Stamp sales are already down, and as you now know, that means less money for conservation. What clearly needs to happen is for more people to be driven to collecting these things. And for that to work, you really need this year's entry to be an absolute doozy. And that is where we come in, because the fact is, anyone can enter this contest, and I'm happy to announce that this year, this anyone did. We commissioned a painter to create this gorgeous oil painting of a blue-winged teal flying in the Nintendo game Duck Hunt, meeting their ridiculous hunting requirements. This is a real, beautifully detailed painting that took months of work, but I'm sorry to say, it was actually disqualified because of, and I quote, the rule against having any numbers or lettering on the entry, which is a truly ridiculous requirement. It's like if they said no duck stamp is allowed to feature cans of SpaghettiOs or Paul Sorvino. What happened in past contests that prompted that regulation? So that is the bad news. The good news is, we actually had a second entry, specifically this painting of ducks judging the duck stamp art contest. Unfortunately, we fell victim to the same bullshit number rule, and this was disqualified too. So, you can probably imagine just how relieved we were to suddenly remember that we'd actually entered 3 other paintings as well, all of which, I'm happy to say, did qualify for this weekend's contest. So let's take a look at them. First, there is this one, of a redhead duck hunting a hunter, hunting another duck. Behold the ominous, quietly maniacal look in that duck's eyes. He's about to pull the trigger. It's a haunting yet triumphant image. So let's see if the duck stamp judges liked it.
Please vote. It's out.
Are you fucking kidding me? Not one of you judges voted for that? Ridiculous. Simply ridiculous. All 5 of you should be ashamed of yourselves. But you know what? It's fine. Because remember, we still had 2 others. Next up was this entry, duck with a pearl earring, which I would argue is exquisite. It makes the original Vermeer look like a complete pile of shit. That girl doesn't even have any feathers, or a beak for that matter. What a waste of paint. So surely, the judges loved this one.
Please vote. It's out.
Oh, come on! These judges are fucking clowns! They don't know shit about art, they don't know shit about ducks, and they certainly don't know shit about duck art. And look, I'm not alone in being shocked by this. The people watching the contest's live stream were very into this entry, writing, gorgeous, perfect, stunning, yes, and I want that on my wall. And of course they do. What cultured duck art lover would not want that? So at this point, I admit, we were getting pretty nervous. Luckily, our final painting was guaranteed to blow everyone away because it is this masterpiece depicting a giant duck brokering peace between longtime duck art rivals Tim Taylor and Rob McBroom. No one in their right mind would not put this through at least to the second round, right? So judges, it's over to you.
Please vote. It's out.
Fuck yourself straight to hell! I'm sorry, the federal duck stamp contest just lost all of its integrity, although I do admit the judges were not actually the only ones who did not care for that entry. Tim Taylor himself actually replied to the painting in the chat with, "I don't know why anyone painted that." Really, Tim? You don't? I know why someone would paint that. It's because, one, we paid them to, and two, it's fucking awesome. That's why. So sadly, none of our entries made it past the first round of voting, and eventually the prize went to this entry.